Hey, this is Amy with Creative Catapult Coaching, looking in random directions as always.
And Megan with Focus Like a Mother, looking exhausted as always.
This is the Control All Thing podcast conversations with neurodivergent minds.
And this week, I believe our topic is common, I guess,
Neurodivergent vocabulary and our take on it, and some of our
yeah.
professional knowledge and background. You had a different thought.
No, that I was trying to think of the words. The words, they're there. They're hard.
Words can be hard. So there's a ton of stuff floating out there, especially with AI writing definitions. Some of them are close and fit with our professional knowledge of brains, but also ADHD and any of the other flavors, some of the other flavors of neurodivergence. I'm not going to speak for all of them because that's like saying, oh, I can speak for everybody who has ADHD. You've met one person with ADHD and you've met one person with ADHD, but there are some common words that float around there. We thought we'd hit on a couple of things: time blindness, waiting mode, body doubling, hyperfocus. One of my favorites that isn't quite as widely spoken about, hyperfocus hangover, rejection sensitivity, and doom piles. This is a random assortment that I generated right now. Well, 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and the other flavors that Amy's talking about, since we're defining things, so ADHD, and then the other flavors under the umbrella of neurodivergence, some of which this is not all inclusive, but autism, ADHD, which is a person who is both autistic and ADHD, and those two profiles kind of
Create
tug and
some
pull.
interesting additional dynamics.
Yeah, so
But other
there's lots
things,
of uh lots of labels that fall under neurodivergence that a lot of these definitions will resonate for.
yeah, and some of the other labels and neurodivergent and that umbrella is a flexible term right now. It is very fluid and depending on who you talk to, depends on what's grouped under it, but it can be giftedness, it can be obsessive compulsive, it can be depression, it can be trauma, it can be on and on and on and on. And it's just,
Dyslexia,
yeah, all these things that
yeah.
essentially impact how that change from how somebody experiences the world other than this very narrow version of what somehow got to be considered normal or the expected. So, this is a complicated topic, and we're looking to not make it overly complicated, but acknowledge that there's nuance that we're not going to hit on or be able to cover and convey in half a lifetime.
So, what what words do we have to talk
Well,
about
let's start with
definitions?
time blindness. You were just telling me about you had a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, somebody asked me uh, something along the line of, is it possible to just be completely unaware of time and kind of like lose track or get lost in time? And it's like, oh yeah, that could be time
That is
blindness.
the thing, time blindness. And time blindness, most people kind of get it, but it's actually a whole bunch of things kind of interwoven under the same label. Time blindness is one of, or time awareness is part of the executive functioning system. So how your brain plans and prioritizes and organizes the world. A lot of time blindness has to do with remembering to remember things at certain times, and being aware of the passage of time. Time blindness can be getting so absorbed in something that you don't realize it's been 6 hours, or
Mhm.
that forgot to leave when you should because you were doing something else caught your attention and you didn't hear all your reminders go off. Um, can be not really being aware of how long it can take to do something. Um, you know, so having a sense of how long something will take. Oh, I can totally do, an entire week's worth of work in the next hour and a half.
I can totally get that chore done 7 hours later. It's not
Right.
done yet.
Anything else you want to add? We're going to keep these short, and we may come back in the future and do kind of a deeper dive and a more extensive knowledge-based background for some of these.
I think the only ad that I have on that is if anybody listening or watching this thinks of anything, has questions, or has their own perspectives, add them in the comments so that then when we do a more in-depth one, we can look back and see what others' experiences are or what others' questions are.
Kind of related to time blindness is actually waiting mode.
Oh, waiting mode.
Some people don't have waiting mode as often as others. I don't have it super often, but do you want to go and talk about what waiting mode is off the bat?
I can, you can correct my definition when I describe it.
Well,
So
again, we
this
were
is another one that I was talking with someone and they were like, oh, that's what that's called. So if you have, say, an appointment, something important at, you know, 2 o'clock this afternoon, and it's different than your usual schedule or routine or whatever. It's you've got this thing you've got to remember to go and do. You get stuck in waiting mode before,
you
and
can't do
it's
anything
basically
else.
like you can't do anything else. And you can't figure out why. And it's most likely because your brain is trying really hard to remember to do this thing that even unconsciously you're like, well, not going to go do anything else because I'm waiting on this thing. And it can happen to this is one that I know happens with autistic individuals too, is like sometimes kids won't be able to get out of the car because they're like you're going to go in the house for like an hour and then leave for another appointment or something and it's like no,
Mm,
I'm stuck, right? So it's kind of like a period of getting stuck because your brain and your nervous system are waiting or in anticipation of something that is expected.
yeah, and that's another one that people, just kind of identify with when it's like, oh, I have that thing later in the day and I can't cook. I can't, start this project even though I know it's not going to take very long. Um, I'm trying to think of what I had one a week or two ago in a way that I don't normally, and it was like, oh, this is waiting mode. And I was waiting for, I think it was something I was really anxious over, and it's like normally I can work on some other tasks or projects if they're well defined, but I just couldn't make myself and sit down before this important conversation later in the afternoon, and I was really annoyed.
Yeah, and I feel like I experience more in the longer term of like there's this event or this thing coming up and I get stuck because I like there's this thing but there's nothing I can do about this thing, but I can't do other things. That made absolutely no sense. But
Except
but
so
it's
many of
a
these are experiential. I mean, and there is some neuroscience backing a lot of it. A lot of
it's a
what we're doing is kind of on the experiential side today.
yes. And on the executive function side, though, it's a form of difficulty transitioning. So it's like shifting gears, but
Well, and
it's
yeah,
sort of
it sounds
preemptive
like
of the
actually
shifting.
shifting your focus as much as
Hmm.
anything. So transition, but also pulling out of one mode,
Hmm.
shifting your attention and re-engaging elsewhere,
Hmm.
um, with some other time components tied
Well, since
in.
we're talking about focus, what about hyperfocus?
Hyperfocus, there are lots of different definitions used colloquially here, and hyperfocus. A lot of times people will argue, is it flow? Is it, what about when you're compelled to do something and can't stop? Hyperfocus is just essentially a very fixed ability to concentrate on something that is usually interesting and engaging. There are definitely more down versions of it. Hyperfixation, um, where you kind of ruminate and get stuck on something that you don't want to be pulled into. And then
So
the opposite end, flow, that is kind of easier. You're in sort of that optimal functioning state. You're engaged, you're interested, you lose sense of time in a different way, but you can pull out and disengage.
So flow is more, so all three that you're talking about, hyperfixation, hyperfocus, and flow, are all kind of under a similar umbrella term, but it's whether there's a positive connotation, a negative connotation, like
And I
whether it's
think
working
use
with.
some, yeah, and can you pull out? I mean, because like the hyper fixation is almost, it's, I don't know how far down the compulsion spectrum is, but you don't necessarily want to be doing something anymore, but you can't stop. I have gotten
Mm,
this way on business projects. I am going to finish the bookkeeping, and it, turns into a 14-hour process, and it's like I will leave and
mm.
come back, and problem solving. I'm not necessarily enjoying it, but it's like I can't stop it either.
Yeah, I have some things where I have to finish it, and it'll bother me if I can't finish and close whatever that task is. Um, and I can't work on other things that I may actually need to do because I need to finish this.
Yeah, brains and nervous systems are just weird. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to add from your knowledge about kind of those three?
No, the only thing is, well, I guess not no. The only thing is the visual to me. So in the past, we've shared the visual of the ADHD example of trying to hold a whole bunch of balloons and not being able to manage all the balloons.
Hmm.
So to me, hyperfocus is almost like, see if there's anything exciting on the back of this.
It's kind of like
Um,
tunnel vision is what I
Almost
think of.
like there's one balloon and it's taking up my whole field of vision. And so the other balloons aren't gone, but I can only work on this one balloon and whether I want that balloon in front of my face or not. So that's every time I think of like if I'm stuck on something and I can't not be thinking about it. So for me, sometimes it's special interests. It's like, no, I want to read this other article about this plant. Like, this is really not necessary right now, but the plant thing is the balloon in front of me, and I have to finish with this balloon before I can move on to any other balloon.
Yeah, but um, but in lieu of that, one that was related and new to me until a few years ago when a client used the term, and I kind of picked it up from her, was hyperfocus hangover.
Mm,
And that you've spent so much dopamine on focusing on this task for an extended period that your dopamine actually drops down the next day and you just can feel kind of bleh. And
how is that compared to like burnout?
a shorter time frame.
Okay,
And probably a lot more nuance than that, but hyperfocus hangover is kind of like something that in a day or two you're probably gonna pop out
okay.
of it, assuming you give yourself the time and space to recover.
Hmm.
This was somebody who was going through law school and studying for the bar, so they were often very deeply engaged in
Hmm.
cram studying,
Hmm.
but learning to pace that so that they could actually do something more sustainable than, the high and
The
low of the hyper focus
Yeah,
and
that
then the
whole wave.
crash.
Yeah.
Um, there's probably a lot more technical neuroscience behind that. But again, that's a colloquial term that I like, and people again identify with it. It's like you've been
Mhm.
really focused on something, and the next day you're just like, oh, I can't do anything. I can't work. I can't. And it's like, and explaining it kind of like a hangover, something that a lot of adults understand the analogy because at some point a
Hmm.
lot of people have been there.
Yeah, it's something like you said, the shorter time frame, and it's something that if you manage well and rest and recover and support yourself, then there's a rebound out of it.
Yeah. Um, Another broad one that I think is both underused, misunderstood, and people identify with is rejection sensitivity and rejection sensitive dysphoria, which are two different versions of the same of two pieces on a spectrum.
Mm. So I'll describe one and you tell me which what it would be called as. But for children, or even adults, but can definitely identify or notice it very well with children is feeling like they're in trouble all the time, even if they're not in trouble and have done nothing wrong, just feeling like they're going to get in trouble. So for me as an adult, so that's the very generalized version, but for me as an adult, getting called to HR in one of my very first engineering jobs, um, as a young, kid right out of undergrad and stuff, and thinking that it was the end of the world and I was going to get fired. And Amy, I turned around like half an hour later and walked out of the HR manager's office holding a piece of paper with my raise on it and my promotion.
I would say that that's actually rejection sensitivity. And I'm not sure that that's technically quite the right term there. Rejection sensitive dysphoria is actually kind of like a gut punch and is like
Okay.
that dramatic for a lot of people. You know, you either think somebody rejected you or might, or something that, is rejected. But it is this incredibly entire nervous system gut punch.
So
Essentially,
like
I
someone
would
who cried,
describe.
like to me, it kind of goes back to the over underreacting nervous system of some neurodivergent individuals. The underreacting would be like someone's completely oblivious, but the overreacting would be like crying and getting upset that someone's mad at you and there's absolutely nothing like, but internally that's what you feel.
Yeah. And that was just a point of, what, sorry, it's just a weird reaction on my screen for a second. Um, where I'd like to dig into it more, and there's a lot of debate and, lack of clarity on kind of where the two terms distinguish themselves. So rejection sensitive dysphoria is, I still don't think quite in the DSM-4 or 5, but it is actually a term that is more clinical and is that just incredibly intense reactivity versus just kind of still awful feeling, but reactivity, that more neurodivergent people have to be afraid that they are being rejected, but not
Yeah.
necessarily with that full on, I've been punched in the gut level of pain to each incident.
Okay.
And that, it's again, I would like to dig into more of that, and there's some neat resources out there, but that's another exploration and rabbit hole I'm not going down
Yeah,
to.
I think to understand it, you would really have to be able to understand someone's internal experience of their own reaction, um, to know what it actually, like how severe how extreme the internal feeling is.
Yeah. Um, but there a lot of people on that neurodivergent spectrum are more reactive to perceived criticism or real criticism, and that it's
Mhm.
not imaginary. The nervous system does fire harder, stronger, and for a longer period of time for a lot of people with that wiring.
And it kind of goes with perfectionism tendencies too. Is that right?
I think it can, although a lot of that is trying to protect yourself from that emotional, terrible feeling.
Mhm.
At least the way I have thought about it. And in that space, totally different gear, but going from internal evaluation of nervous system to the classic doom piles. This is kind of a
Looking
fun
around
term,
like,
but essentially just piles that have, built up over time and are now kind of daunting and overwhelming to deal with, and they never go away. I have many of them. I've also heard it
I'm
applied
like
to
looking
doom
around
rooms,
like,
doom
do,
closets,
do.
doom drawers.
Oh, a doom room. Yes, yes. I am familiar with this concept. Not in, well, I've always just thought about it as like I guess doom room makes sense, but it's like the room where things just go, but
Uh-huh.
then no one wants to actually go in there and deal with the things.
Yeah. Well, and part of I think what starts as a doom pile is, it's like, oh well, things don't have home. You need to make a decision about it, and then you start adding things to it, and pretty soon it's just this whole stack of assorted things that have to be dealt with and require a bunch of emotional energy, whether that's the mail and, in between that are some of the seed packets that you wanted to plant and maybe some of the notes from a really neat webinar you listened to a while ago. I'm just looking at my own desk going, oh yeah, and
I'm
that,
just making face.
that manual I was going to reread and the notebook.
Amy, why are you describing my house?
And just knowing that, it's common and that, there are ways to deal with it because a lot of it too is a lot of neurodivergent people like to see things, but you can get so much out that it can be hard to really know what you're seeing anymore.
Question though.
Yeah.
So at times, my husband has described my cleaning style as just moving piles from place to place.
Mhm.
Um, but I, from lived experience, I know this to be a common thing for a lot of neurodivergent people is if you mess with someone's doom pile, their brain actually has that
Some
filed
idea of what's
as
there.
as a storage place, um, and they know where everything is. In theory, it may take a few hours to find it, but what gets me is like if I don't really call them doom piles, they're just it's a vertical organization system, okay? Um, but if they get moved, or if someone else tries to help with the doom pile, and then the things are not where they were before, like my brain goes, oh, that's in such and such place. And then I go and like my garage had my husband cleaned. And now I'm like, where is my thing for the garden? And he's like, it's out there somewhere. That's supposed to be your motivation to go finish putting things away. But even though it looks super disorganized, I feel like some neurodivergent brains, not necessarily all, but for some people, that's like you're actually keeping track of it in your head. And it could
Well,
go with
then
some
I
of the
would
cognitive
question, is it
overload. It's
actually a
like I'm
doom
remembering
pile?
all
Because
these
a doom
things.
pile is something that you kind of you look at it, or at least the way I understand, kind of use it is you look at it and you don't really know what's there and it's overwhelming and you look at it and be, "Oh, I'll deal with it later."
But what's funny is, so I have some of those, except for that if you were to ask me, hey, where is the X, Y, or Z? Then my brain will go, oh, that's over there on that desk in that pile. but if I were to look at that pile, I would not, like in a separate instance, I would
Mhm.
not acknowledge that that thing was there.
It's just an
But to me,
interesting.
laundry in its entire existence is a doom pile. It goes from a dirty doom pile to a task of washing it to a clean, laid out flat stack of doom pile. And then you don't know what's actually in there until you need the outfit, and then you have to go find it.
Yeah.
Okay, we should move on from doom piles
All
because
right. Well, that was
I'm
about the
I'm just
last one
out.
I was thinking because we can probably go on indefinitely. And I don't know if our definitions are frankly that much better than, but they're things we all
But
have
do
experience with and, can talk to some of them. I've seen some, like one of the lists that listed some of the terms. What was the one that you were saying was like, okay, that's not what that means.
um, hang on a second.
Um,
I like how our brains know exactly what we're talking about, but we can't think of
Yeah,
anything.
we
Um,
started from a list that we were like, oh, this was an AI written thing.
we were
And
talking
a
about
lot of it is
the
colloquial and a lot of it
emotional
isn't
flooding. I said, oh
emotional
no, that's more
flooding.
like a meltdown, but okay.
Um, there was another one on there that I had a different.
Object permanence issues.
Yeah, object permanence issues, when you start digging into the neuroscience, it's not really the same out of sight, out of mind thing that you deal with as a, 2 or 3 year old, 18-month-old. I'm really bad at my kid milestones.
Yeah, so it's the early childhood development. Um, very young toddlers learn object permanence by, oh, you made a ball disappear. To their brain, the ball is like legit just gone, but then it reappears. And so at that young age, their brain is actually learning that the thing, when it disappears, doesn't actually disappear. Um, that's not the same. It's not
And
the
yet
proper
that's
use of
very,
object permanence.
very commonly talked about with ADHD or a lot of executive dysfunction is object impermanence. And I think it's really more about memory versus like thinking a thing doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
again, it's the colloquial use. And so there's a lot
In
to be
the
said for people understand what you mean. That's like, and I will say that I will forget to call my friends and my family for weeks on end.
Mhm.
Because it just doesn't enter my mind. But I don't think that they've like vanished. I just don't think about
Yeah.
it, which is
The
technically different.
neuroscience, it's probably in like the attention part of
It's
the
yeah, but the
neuroscience world.
attention or the memory.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of the way people use it is it makes sense and it conveys a concept, but it's not right.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah,
not going to tell people not to use it that way. But
it's
again,
not
it's
an
just a,
accurate use of the terminology. Um,
and with more and more people doing memes and, so much of the self-education, I think that it's just kind of a neat thing to do is, to put some other professional backed
yeah. Well, I
information
think
back into the mixing pot.
you and I both do evidence-based coaching.
Yeah.
So we very much base the strategies and techniques and tools that we use in our practices on scientific research and proven theory. So, as well as then sharing our own lived experience.
Yeah.
So it's kind
And
of,
I'm not going to just lived experience is really important. So I'm not going to, come down on somebody for describing, you know, like, you know,
well, and
object permanence.
words are tricky.
They evolve, like,
So,
and I mean, one of the people that I watch occasionally on like Instagram is somebody who goes by the handle language nerd, and they talk about the
mm,
evolution of language and especially with
mm,
AI and
mm.
language
Well, that's
isn't
as soon
static.
as you showed me the list that we were, and this will have to be a whole nother like topic. So I have a pattern recognition thing that is just one of my
It's
built-in
just your
features.
brain wired.
Um, So Amy shows me this list, and we were like 30 seconds into talking about the list, and I said, Amy, this was written by AI. And she's like, I think you said like, well, I could tell, but I wasn't like looking like you weren't looking that. I was like, no, as soon as I read the very first thing on the list, my brain immediately had the like alarm bells go off. But it's just more because I pick up on all of those patterns,
I
and
pick up
so
on a lot of
it's
them,
like a
but yeah.
like I can't listen to commercials anymore. Um, Not that anybody wants to listen to commercials, but that'll have to be pattern recognition and AI will have to be one of our
Yeah, that should be another one. Well,
topics
just
sometime.
pattern recognition. Okay, we got way into
Okay.
this was in theory going to be a short, focused episode, which as neurodivergent brains are wont to do, we are down
Oh,
rabbit holes.
I get, yeah. So can you tell me about rabbit holes and then that can be our last one?
Sure, rabbit holes are, the definition of getting sidetracked by something interesting and going down a very interesting, but not originally where you intended to go learning path, conversation path, exploration path. Um,
In the nerddom of neurodivergence, they can also be known as side quests.
that, yep. And again, rabbit holes, I think is a pretty older, I
It
don't think that's
is.
a new
Yeah.
term at all. I think it was around when I was a kid, even.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a super common one because, you could walk
Human
outside and fall
experience,
down a rabbit hole. Um,
neurodivergent people we're not
yes. But
totally unique in our experiences of the world.
I heard someone call it a side quest, and then it
Yeah.
didn't feel like a waste of time because I actually do accomplish something when I fall down a rabbit hole. I learn something, or if I'm Roomba cleaning and I'm just
Well,
wandering
that's
around the house
another one
cleaning
we should
things,
get. Roomba
yeah, we'll have
cleaning
to
would
add
be
that to our list for next time.
um all right. With that, before we fall down in another, set of constellation rabbit holes, this is Amy with Creative Catapult Coaching. You can find me online at creativecatapultcoach.com and on all the random social places.
And Megan with Focus Like a Mother, and you can find me at focuslikeamother.com, and my social media handle is Focus Like a Mother, all one word, I suppose. Um, and otherwise, I suppose that's it until next time, because this is Control Alt Think Conversations with Neurodivergent Minds.
We should have called it Rambling with Neurodivergent Minds. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.